Every time I walked into the gym, my heart raced at the sight of my instructor, Tony. His charming smile and encouraging words made every workout feel special. But one day, as I was in the locker room, everything changed when he surprised me. Little did I know, this moment would lead us into an unexpected and romantic journey together. It was one of those late afternoons at the gym, the kind where the evening crowd had already come and gone, and the place was eerily quiet. I had been working out for almost 2 hours, pushing myself harder than usual. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and metal, and the rhythmic clanking of weights was the only sound that filled the vast, empty space. My muscles burned from the strain, and my mind was focused on the simple routine of reps and sets. It was like a form of escape, a way to disconnect from everything else. But little did I know, that day was about to take a turn I could have never expected. My gym instructor, Tony, had been watching me the whole time. He was always around, casually observing from a distance, occasionally giving me pointers on my form, or pushing me to go a little harder when he thought I could take it. He was tall, muscular, with the kind of rugged handsomeness that made him look like he belonged on the cover of a fitness magazine. His broad shoulders, toned arms, and sharp jawline made him intimidating, but there was something about his easygoing smile that always put me at ease. Today, though, something felt different. I could feel his gaze linger on me longer than usual, his eyes tracking my movements as I moved from one machine to the next. Every now and then, he'd walk past me, close enough that I could catch a whiff of his cologne, something woodsy and masculine, something that made my pulse quicken in ways I hadn't expected. There was an unspoken tension in the air, something electric that made my skin tingle whenever he was near. After finishing my last set, drenched in sweat, I decided to call it a day. My legs felt heavy as I headed toward the locker room, eager to cool down and take a shower. I had just peeled off my sweaty tank top and was rummaging through my bag for my towel when I heard the door to the locker room creak open behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it, assuming it was just another gym goer, but when I glanced in the mirror, I saw Tony standing in the doorway. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there watching me with that intense look in his eyes. My heart skipped a beat, a sudden wave of nervousness washing over me. I wasn't sure what he was doing here. The locker room was empty. Usually, Tony stayed out on the gym floor, offering advice or spotting someone on the bench press. But now, here he was, standing just a few feet away from me in the quiet, empty space, his eyes locked on mine. "Hey," he said finally, his voice low and smooth, like he was testing the waters. "You've been pushing yourself pretty hard today." I nodded, unsure of what to say. My throat felt dry, and my skin prickled with a strange kind of anticipation. There was something in his tone that made my stomach flutter, a subtle shift from the usual casual banter we shared during our training sessions. "You know, I've been meaning to talk to you about something," he continued, stepping further into the locker room. His presence felt larger, more commanding in the confined space, and I found myself backing up slightly instinctively as he closed the distance between us. "Yeah? What's that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was racing now, thudding loudly in my chest. Tony didn't answer right away. Instead, he took another step closer, close enough now that I could see the beads of sweat still clinging to his skin, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. His eyes, dark and intense, were fixed on mine, and I could feel the heat radiating off his body, mixing with the lingering warmth from my own post-workout adrenaline. "I've noticed something about you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper now, like he was sharing a secret. "You're different. There's something about the way you move, the way you carry yourself. You're stronger than you realize." I felt a blush creeping up my neck, my heart pounding in my ears. His words were simple, but the way he said them, the way he looked at me, made them feel heavy with meaning. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Was this just his way of motivating me like he always did? Or was there something more here, something unspoken that hung in the air between us? Before I could respond, Tony took another step forward, and suddenly he was standing right in front of me, so close that I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin. His hand reached out, fingers brushing against my arm, sending a shiver through my body. The touch was light, almost innocent, but there was an undeniable charge behind it, a tension that made the air around us feel thick and heavy. "You don't have to hide it," he murmured, his eyes searching mine. "I've seen the way you look at me, the way your body reacts when I'm near." My breath hitched in my throat, my mind spinning. I hadn't realized I'd been so transparent, but now that he was saying it out loud, I couldn't deny it. There had been moments, fleeting glances, lingering touches, that I had brushed off as nothing, chalking it up to the natural closeness that came with working out together. But now, standing here with him so close, I could feel the truth of it. There was something between us, something I had tried to ignore but could no longer deny. Tony's hand moved to my waist, his grip firm but gentle, and I felt my body respond instinctively, leaning into his touch. My heart was racing, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and desire. I knew I should step back, create some distance, but I couldn't. I didn't want to. The tension between us had been building for so long, and now that it was finally coming to a head, I felt powerless to stop it. "Tell me you don't feel it," he whispered, his lips dangerously close to mine. "Tell me you haven't been thinking about this as much as I have." I couldn't speak. My mind was blank, every coherent thought drowned out by the overwhelming sensation of his hand on my skin, the heat of his body pressed so close to mine. The space between us felt electric, like the air itself was buzzing with the intensity of our unspoken desires. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and all I could do was stare into his eyes, unable to look away. Tony leaned in, his lips brushing against my ear as he spoke again, his voice a low, seductive murmur. "I've been thinking about you. Every time I see you in the gym, I can't stop wondering what it would be like to be closer to you, to feel you." His words sent a jolt of electricity through me, and I felt my body respond instinctively, my skin tingling with the anticipation of what was about to happen. I knew this was dangerous, knew that we were crossing a line, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The way he looked at me, the way he touched me, made it impossible to think about anything else. Before I could say anything, Tony's lips were on mine, soft but insistent, and I felt myself melt into the kiss. His hand slid up my back, pulling me closer, and I wrapped my arms around his neck, my body responding to him in ways I hadn't anticipated. The kiss deepened, our movements slow and deliberate, each touch more intense than the last. I could feel the heat between us building, the tension that had been simmering for so long finally finding its release. Every touch, every kiss felt like it was driving me closer to the edge, and I could feel Tony's desire mirroring my own. His hands roamed my body, exploring every inch of skin, and I found myself giving in to the sensation, letting go of any reservations I had. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours, and the intensity between us only grew stronger. Tony's hands were everywhere, his touch both rough and gentle, and I found myself craving more, needing more. I had never felt anything like this before, never experienced such an overwhelming connection with someone, and it left me breathless. His lips moved to my neck, planting soft kisses along my collarbone, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. My hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer as I lost myself in the moment. The world outside ceased to exist. All that mattered was this, the way he made me feel, the way our bodies moved together in perfect sync. Tony's breath was heavy in my ear, and I could feel his hands trembling slightly as they moved lower, his touch sending waves of pleasure through me. Every moment felt like it was building to something bigger, something neither of us could control. The intensity was overwhelming, and I could feel myself getting lost in the sensation, in the heat of his touch, and the press of his body against mine. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, Tony pulled back slightly, his eyes dark with desire as he looked at me. "I've wanted this for so long," he whispered, his voice husky and filled with a need that mirrored my own. I nodded, unable to speak, my breath coming in short gasps as I tried to catch my breath. My skin was on fire, every nerve ending alive with anticipation, and I could feel the tension between us building to a breaking point. There was no turning back now, whatever line we had. We had already crossed it, and there was no going back. The intensity in Tony's eyes, the way his hands moved over my body, told me that he wanted this just as much as I did. His lips found mine again, hungrier this time, more urgent. I could feel the heat of his breath against my skin, his body pressing closer, as if the space between us was unbearable. Tony's hands gripped my waist, pulling me even tighter against him. My heart was pounding in my chest, the room around us fading into the background as every sensation, every touch became sharper, more intense. His fingers trailed down my back, slow and deliberate, making my skin tingle with anticipation. I could feel the tension between us building with every second, like we were both on the edge of something we couldn't stop. His lips moved from my mouth to my neck, planting soft, heated kisses along my skin. Each one sent a jolt of electricity through me, and I found myself tilting my head back, giving him more access as his mouth worked its way down. I could feel his breath, warm and ragged, against my collarbone, his hands moving up my sides, exploring every inch of me. The locker room was quiet, the only sound the soft echo of our breathing, the rustle of fabric as we moved against each other. My pulse quickened, and I felt myself getting lost in the heat of the moment, in the way Tony's touch made everything else disappear. His hands slid lower, exploring with a confidence that made my whole body respond to him. I felt his lips against my ear again, his breath hot and shaky as he whispered, "I've been waiting for this. For you." His words sent a wave of heat through me, and I couldn't hold back anymore. My hands moved across his chest, feeling the hard muscles beneath his shirt, and I pulled him closer, needing to feel every part of him. His grip tightened on me, and I could feel the tension in his body, the way he was holding back, as if he was savoring every second before letting go completely. Time seemed to blur as we gave in to the desire that had been building between us for so long. Every touch, every kiss, felt like a fire igniting between us, growing hotter and more intense with each passing moment. The space around us seemed to shrink, the air thick with heat and longing, as if the entire world had disappeared, leaving just the two of us. Tony's hands roamed over my body, exploring, teasing, making my skin burn with every touch. His lips never left my skin, moving from my neck to my shoulders, his kisses growing more heated, more demanding. I could feel the tension in every muscle of his body, the way his breath came in short, shallow bursts, as if he was barely holding himself together. We moved together, our bodies pressed close, every inch of us connected. The intensity of it all was overwhelming, like nothing I had ever felt before. I was lost in the moment, lost in him, and nothing else mattered. The world outside the locker room ceased to exist. There was only us, and the fire between us that refused to die down. Tony's hands gripped my hips, pulling me closer as his lips found mine again, the kiss more urgent than before, more demanding. I could feel his need in the way he touched me, the way he held me, as if he couldn't get enough. And I knew in that moment that I couldn't get enough of him either. Tony's touch grew more deliberate, his fingers tracing the curves of my body with a slow intensity that made my pulse race. Every movement was careful, yet filled with a hunger that was impossible to ignore. His hands, large and warm, slid down my back, pressing me closer to him until there was no space left between us. The heat of his body seeped into mine, and I felt the rhythm of his breath against my skin, heavy and uneven. Every inch of me was attuned to his movements, his touch igniting something deep inside that I could no longer resist. His lips found mine again, softer this time, but the kiss was no less powerful. It was as if every brush of his lips against mine told me what words couldn't. I could feel his desire, his restraint, the way he was holding back just enough to keep the moment suspended, as if he wanted to make it last as long as possible. My hands gripped his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles, the way they flexed beneath my touch. It was intoxicating, the way we moved together, like we had been waiting for this for so long. I felt his hands move lower, exploring the curve of my waist, his fingers grazing my skin in a way that sent shivers down my spine. My breath hitched, and I pressed into him, craving more, needing more. The air around us was thick with unspoken need, the silence only broken by the sound of our breathing, quick and shallow. His eyes, dark and intense, met mine, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. It was as if the whole world had faded away, leaving just the two of us in this stolen moment. Tony's hand slid up my back again, pulling me into another deep kiss, and I could feel the raw desire in the way he touched me, the way his fingers tightened on my skin. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the rush of blood in my ears as every second seemed to stretch out longer than the last. His lips left mine, trailing down my neck, planting soft, lingering kisses that made my skin tingle. I tilted my head back, giving him more access, and I felt the tension building again, stronger than before. The sensation of his lips against my skin, his hands exploring every inch of me, was overwhelming. It was like every nerve in my body was on fire, every touch making me more aware of how close we were. My fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and I could feel the heat of his breath against my collarbone as he kissed his way down my chest. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he was savoring every moment, every touch, and it drove me wild with anticipation. My breath came in short, shallow gasps as the intensity between us reached a fever pitch. I could feel the tension in every muscle of my body, the way my skin seemed to burn under his touch. There was a raw, electric energy between us, a connection that felt unbreakable, like we were caught in a current we couldn't escape. His lips found mine again, more urgent this time, and I knew that whatever was happening between us, it was unstoppable. We had crossed the line and there was no going back. As we moved together, the weight of everything else, every worry, every doubt, faded into the background. All that mattered was this moment, the way our bodies fit together, the heat between us, the overwhelming intensity of it all. Time seemed to blur, and I lost myself in the feeling of his hands on my skin, his breath against my neck, his lips claiming mine over and over again. It was like nothing I had ever experienced before, and I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again.